The house was too quiet. Only the ticking clock and the soft crackle of candlelight broke the silence. Emma adjusted the silverware again, even though it was already perfect. Fork, knife, napkin, symmetry flawless. 10 years of marriage, and she still couldn't stop herself from wanting things to look right, even when nothing felt right. Outside, rain began to fall. Slow, steady, deliberate. It mirrored her heartbeat. Daniel was late. He was always late lately. She glanced at the roast cooling on the counter and checked her phone again. No message. The same dull ache pulsed behind her ribs, half anger, half worry. When the door finally opened, she flinched. He stepped in, his smile too polished, his apology too smooth. Traffic was a nightmare, he said, brushing rain from his coat. His scent filled the room. Cologne, whiskey, and something sharp she couldn't place. "It's fine," she murmured, forcing warmth into her voice. "Dinner's ready." They sat across from each other, candlelight flickering between them. His eyes never quite met hers. He complimented the food, joked about work, poured the wine. To anyone else, it might have seemed normal, even loving. But Emma noticed the way he avoided talking about his day, how his phone stayed screen down beside his plate. When she reached for the bottle to refill her glass, his hand brushed hers. Cold, detached. The same hand that used to make her feel safe now made her skin crawl. 10 years, Daniel said softly, raising his glass. "Can you believe it?" She smiled thinly. "Feels like forever." He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. For a fleeting moment, his gaze drifted to the knife beside her plate. A glimmer passed in his eyes, too quick to name. Emma froze, her hand tightening around her fork. "Something wrong?" Daniel blinked, then smiled again. That same smooth, unreadable smile. "Not at all, just thinking." "About what?" "About promises," he said, taking another sip of wine. "How people keep them. Or don't." The clock ticked louder. The rain fell harder. When he stood to clear his plate, she watched him disappear into the kitchen. Alone at the table, Emma stared at the empty seat across from her, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was the one being lied to, or the one in danger. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the windows streaked and silvered in light. Emma stood at the kitchen counter, still in her robe, tracing the rim of her coffee mug. The table was empty now, the candles burned to stubs, the dishes untouched. Last night lingered like smoke she couldn't clear from her lungs. On the counter, half hidden beneath the morning paper, lay an old photograph. Their wedding day. She picked it up carefully, her fingers smudging the glossy surface. Daniel in a black suit, eyes bright, his hand wrapped around hers as if she were something precious. She remembered the sound of laughter, the scent of lilies, the hum of a future she had believed in completely. The church had been warm that day. She could still see the sunlight falling across the pews, the white of her dress glowing like a promise. When the priest asked them to speak their vows, Daniel's voice had trembled. Not with fear, but conviction. "Till death do us part," he'd said, looking at her like she was the only thing that existed. The words had made her shiver then. Beautiful, eternal. Now, 10 years later, those same words echoed differently. She set the photo down. Her reflection ghosted over their younger faces. "Till death do us part." She whispered it aloud, testing the shape of it. It didn't sound like love anymore. It sounded like a sentence. She walked to the drawer beside the fridge, pulled it open, and took out a folded paper. Their vows, handwritten on cream stationery. His handwriting was neat, deliberate. She reread the lines he'd written. "I will protect you, cherish you, and never let you go. Never let you go," she murmured. The words prickled under her skin. From outside, a car door slammed. She looked through the curtain. Daniel, already leaving for work. No kiss goodbye, no glance back. Emma stared at the paper one last time, then tucked it into her robe pocket. She didn't know why, but she felt she might need those words again, soon. For the first few days, Emma tried to believe it was just stress. Daniel had been distant before, during promotions, relocations, the usual storms of married life. But this felt different, colder, calculated. He came home later now, always with an excuse on his tongue. Meetings ran long. Client emergencies. "You wouldn't understand, Em, it's complicated." His tone was sharp enough to end any question before it began. The warmth that once tethered them was gone, replaced by silence that pressed against the walls like humidity. At dinner, his phone buzzed constantly. He'd glance down, lips twitching into half smiles before turning the screen away. "Work," he'd say, as if she'd accused him of something. Once, she reached for the phone out of habit. To hand. "Dover?" And he snatched it back so fast that her heart stuttered. The next morning, while folding laundry, Emma found the receipt. It slipped from the pocket of his jeans, thin and crisp, printed with a name she didn't recognize. Riverside Hotel. The date was from last week. A single night. Paid in cash. Her throat went dry. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it as though the ink might rearrange itself into something harmless. But it didn't. When Daniel came home that evening, she watched him from the doorway. The loosened tie, the faint scent of another perfume clinging to his shirt. He looked tired, yes, but satisfied in a way she couldn't explain. "How was work?" she asked, keeping her tone steady. He didn't meet her eyes. "Same as always." "Long meetings?" A pause. Then, "Yeah," she smiled faintly. "At the Riverside?" He froze. A flicker so quick she might have missed it if she hadn't been watching for it. Then came the laugh, light and dismissive. "You've been going through my things again. Just doing laundry." His eyes darkened. "Then maybe stop digging for trouble." The words landed like a slap. He brushed past her, disappearing into the bathroom. Alone, Emma looked toward the bedroom mirror. The reflection staring back seemed unfamiliar. Older, frightened, but quietly certain of one thing. Something was breaking, and it wasn't just their marriage. The next morning, Daniel's jacket hung over the back of the chair. Careless, almost taunting. Emma reached for it, meaning only to put it away, but stopped when the scent hit her. Not his usual aftershave. Something floral, sweet, and dizzying. Like crushed petals on wet skin. She pressed the fabric to her face, inhaling once more just to be sure. It wasn't hers. She hadn't worn perfume in weeks. Her stomach turned cold. By the time Daniel came downstairs, she was standing by the sink, the jacket folded neatly beside her. "You left this out," she said, keeping her voice light. He smiled absently, reaching for his coffee. "Thanks. Who's wearing the new perfume at work?" she asked casually, watching his reaction. Daniel froze just slightly before chuckling. "What perfume?" She lifted the jacket. "This one. It's strong, hard to miss." He looked at her then, really looked, and something dark flickered behind his eyes. "Emma, are we really doing this?" She blinked. "Doing what?" "This," he said, gesturing vaguely. "The jealousy thing." Again, her pulse quickened. "I'm not jealous. He cut her off, voice soft but sharp. "You're imagining things. You always do when you're bored." The words hit harder than he knew. "I'm not imagining a smell, Daniel." He sighed as though indulging a child. "Maybe it's from the office. People hug, walk close, you know how it is." He sipped his coffee, calm, composed. "You've got to stop turning everything into some conspiracy." Emma stared at him, the air between them thick and heavy. He smiled again, that practiced, polished smile. "You should get some rest," he said. "You've been tense lately." When he left, the silence felt colder than before. She picked up the jacket again, held it close, and whispered, "I'm not crazy." But as the scent lingered on her fingers, even she wasn't sure anymore. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The scent of that perfume clung to the edges of her mind, haunting her like a whisper she couldn't silence. Daniel's words echoed again. "You're imagining things." Maybe she was. Or maybe she wasn't imagining enough. At 2 a.m., she slipped quietly out of bed. The hallway light glowed dimly as she moved to the living room, heart pounding. From the junk drawer, she pulled out the small black recorder she'd once used for interviews years ago. Her hands trembled as she checked the batteries, her reflection catching faintly in the dark window. "Just for proof," she murmured to herself. Not paranoia, proof. The next morning, she tucked it beneath the shelf near the coat rack, right where Daniel always took his work calls before leaving. She spent the day pretending. Coffee together, a half-hearted kiss on the cheek. His cologne masked everything now, even the truth. That evening, when he returned, she stayed in the kitchen chopping vegetables she didn't intend to cook. Through the soft hum of the refrigerator, she heard his low voice in the hallway. Calm, measured, then sharper, almost whispering. Yeah, tonight maybe. We'll make it quick. Her knife stopped midair. She strained to listen, pulse roaring in her ears. No, she doesn't know anything, he continued. I'll take care of it. It's better this way. The world seemed to tilt. Emma pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from gasping. A moment later, she heard the familiar sound of the front door closing. He was gone. She waited an eternity before rushing to the recorder, snatching it up with shaking fingers, rewinding, playing. His voice again, smooth, casual, deadly in its calm. We'll make it quick. Her hands went numb. The words repeated in her head until they didn't sound human anymore. Who was he talking to? Who was we? She sat on the floor, clutching the recorder like it was alive. Outside, the rain had returned, tapping against the window pane like faint knocks. For the first time, she realized she might not just be losing her marriage. She might be losing her life. The next morning, Emma waited. She'd replayed the recording at least 20 times, each word slicing deeper until she couldn't tell if it meant everything or nothing. The air felt heavier, the walls tighter, as though the house itself was listening with her. When Daniel finally walked through the door that evening, she didn't pretend. The act was over. We need to talk, she said, voice calm, controlled. He hesitated, then set his briefcase down. About what? About where you've been, who you've been talking to, and what you meant by making it quick. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking clock. Then his expression hardened. You've been recording me? She flinched. Don't twist this, Daniel. He let out a long breath, rubbing his temples. Fine, you want the truth? I lied. The words hit her like a slap. About what? The trips, he said flatly. The late nights. There's no affair, no conspiracy, just me trying to get away from you for a while. Emma stared at him, the confession colder than she'd imagined. To get away from me? His eyes lifted to hers, soft but cruel. You've been on edge for months, Em. Everything turns into an accusation. I needed space. That's all. She shook her head, fighting tears. Space doesn't smell like another woman. Space doesn't whisper about making something quick. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're hearing what you want to hear. You've built this fantasy in your head, and now you can't separate it from reality. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. His tone was so calm, so logical, that for a moment she almost believed him. Almost. I don't know what's real anymore, she whispered. Daniel touched her cheek gently, then stopped trying to find monsters that aren't there. When he walked away, she sank to the floor, tears burning hot and silent. His words echoed through the house, soft and poisonous. Maybe he was right. Maybe she really was losing her mind. 3 days passed in a haze of silence. Daniel had grown gentler, almost apologetic, as if the argument had never happened. He made her breakfast, kissed her cheek, called her Em again. It should have felt comforting, but instead, every kindness felt rehearsed. On the 4th morning, the knock came. Emma opened the door to find a man in his 40s, clean-cut but weary-eyed, his badge flashing briefly beneath his coat. Mrs. Hale? He asked. Detective Ward, County Police. Sorry to bother you. May I come in? Her chest tightened. Of course. He stepped inside, glancing around the living room as though cataloging every detail. I just have a few routine questions if that's all right. About what? She asked. He looked at her carefully. A woman's gone missing. Name's Laura Briggs. She worked in real estate. Maybe you've heard of her? Emma shook her head. The name meant nothing. She was last seen leaving her office 2 nights ago. The last call she made was to a number registered under Daniel Hale. The words seemed to echo inside the house. Daniel's number. Her heartbeat stuttered. Are you sure? She managed. Ward nodded. Yes, ma'am. It's probably nothing serious when it could have been work-related. But your husband hasn't returned our call, and we like to close gaps early. He's at work, she said quickly. He's busy. The detective studied her for a long moment, his tone softening. You seem uneasy. Is everything all right between you two? Emma forced a smile, too brittle to convince anyone. We're fine, Ward nodded slowly. If you remember anything at all, here's my card. He handed it to her. The weight of it in her palm felt heavier than it should have. When the door closed behind him, Emma stood frozen, staring at the card. Her mind spun through every night Daniel had come home late, every lie disguised as routine. Laura Briggs, A stranger's perfume. The hotel receipt. Pieces began to fit together, but not neatly. Not yet. She placed the card on the table and whispered to no one. It wasn't my imagination. Outside, a car engine started in the driveway. Daniel was home early. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The detective's visit replayed in her mind in broken fragments. His measured tone, his searching eyes, the name Laura Briggs. She told herself it was coincidence, but deep down she already knew better. The next morning, Daniel was in the kitchen, humming as he poured coffee. "You're up early," he said, his voice light, too light. "I thought you'd sleep in." Emma nodded, her stomach twisting. "Did you know a woman named Laura Briggs?" The humming stopped. Small pause, maybe half a second before he answered. "Yeah, she works in property management." "Why?" "She's missing," Emma said softly. He frowned, feigning confusion. "Missing? Since when?" She didn't answer. She just watched him and he knew it. "Jesus," he muttered, shaking his head. "That's awful." He took a long sip of coffee, eyes fixed on the counter. "I barely knew her." Hours later, the news broke. Emma stood in the living room, the television flickering pale light across her face. The headline screamed from the bottom of the screen, "Body found near Woodland Lake House. Police investigate possible homicide." The image cut to the shoreline, gray, still, familiar. Emma's chest constricted. She knew that place. Their lake house, the one Daniel had surprised her with years ago, when he'd dropped to one knee and promised her forever. Her hand flew to her mouth. Daniel came in from the hallway, towel over his shoulder, hair damp from the shower. "What's wrong?" She pointed to the screen. "That's our lake house." He froze. The faintest flicker crossed his face, gone almost instantly. "No," he said. "That's not—" He leaned closer, squinting. "Christ, it is." He laughed, breathless, hollow. "What are the odds?" Emma couldn't speak. The reporter's voice filled the silence. "The victim has been identified as 32-year-old Laura Briggs, an employee at a local real estate firm." The room spun. Daniel whispered, "I didn't," then stopped. Emma turned toward him slowly. "Didn't what?" His jaw tightened. "Nothing, just unbelievable, isn't it?" She stared at him, her heart pounding so loud she thought he could hear it. And for the first time, she began to fear that forever had already arrived. Emma spent the next 2 days in silence, letting him think the storm had passed. She smiled when he spoke, laughed when he tried to make light of the news, even let him hold her at night. Inside, she was unraveling every memory, every lie, every word that no longer made sense. By the third evening, she was ready. She cooked his favorite meal, rosemary chicken, the one she hadn't made since before everything went wrong. She poured the wine, dimmed the lights, set the same candles they'd used on their anniversary. Everything looked perfect, and under the centerpiece, carefully hidden, was the small recorder. When Daniel came home, he hesitated at the sight of the table. "This looks nice," he said warily. "I thought we needed a fresh start," she replied, smiling softly. "No more doubts. No more fights." He sat, suspicious but pleased. "You mean that?" "Of course," she said. "It's what we promised, isn't it?" "Till death do us part," he chuckled, raising his glass. "You always take that so seriously." They ate in quiet rhythm, the scrape of forks, the soft murmur of the rain outside. Emma's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would drown out everything. Then she asked casually, "Do you remember the lake house?" Daniel froze. "What about it?" "I was just thinking how beautiful it used to be," she said. "The woods, the dock, that old path by the water." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, shame it's all roped off now. Guess they didn't find everything they were looking for." The fork slipped from her fingers. "They didn't find everything." Her pulse stopped. That detail, that phrasing, it hadn't been on the news. Only someone who'd been there would know. She tried to keep her voice steady. "What do you mean?" But he was already watching her, really watching. His gaze flicked toward the table, to the faint red light glowing beneath the flowers. The recorder, the mask fell from his face. His smile vanished, replaced by something colder, quieter, more real. "Emma," he said softly, standing. "What did you do?" The candles flickered. The rain grew louder, and she realized dinner had just become survival. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The candles hissed softly, wax dripping in slow motion. Daniel's shadow stretched long across the wall, sharp, predatory. "Turn it off," he said, his voice low, almost calm. Emma didn't move. "You killed her." He tilted his head, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "You really shouldn't jump to conclusions." "You said they didn't find everything," she whispered, trembling. "That was your voice." Daniel sighed, stepping closer. "And what were you planning to do with that little toy? Play detective? Or widow?" Her breath came fast. "The police will hear it. They'll know." He laughed softly, the sound hollow. "You think they'll believe you? You've been unraveling for months. Everyone sees it. The paranoia, the late-night calls, the crying. You've built the perfect alibi, Emma." "For me," he lunged. The table tipped. The recorder clattered to the floor. She grabbed the nearest thing, a wine bottle, and swung. It connected with a sickening crack. He stumbled, fury blazing through the daze. "You shouldn't have done that," he hissed, blood glistening at his temple. She ran for the phone. He caught her by the wrist, slamming her against the wall. The air rushed from her lungs. "I never meant for it to be you," he said through clenched teeth, his hands tightening. "But maybe it's better this way." Her vision blurred. The world shrank to the sound of his breathing, the press of his fingers around her throat. Then the instinct, survival. Her hand found the broken wine bottle, jagged and slick. She drove it forward, a gasp, a stumble, then silence. He fell against the table, glass shattering around them. The candles toppled, their flames flickering wildly before dying in the spreading pool of red. Emma sank beside him, shaking, her own breath shallow and uneven. Daniel's eyes stared past her, glassy, unblinking. His wedding ring caught the last of the candlelight, gleaming like a cruel reminder. Sirens wailed in the distance. She pressed her palm to the floor, crimson smearing her skin. When the police burst through the door, they found her whispering, voice cracked but steady. "I kept my vow." The house was a blur of flashing lights and murmured voices. Officers moved through each room, photographing, measuring, collecting pieces of the night that could never be put back together. Emma sat at the kitchen table, a blanket around her shoulders, her eyes hollow and distant. Detective Ward stood across from her, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Hale," he began quietly, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened." She nodded, voice trembling just enough. "He came at me. Tried to get away. He said he couldn't let me ruin his life." She paused, letting her breath shake. "I grabbed the bottle, but he didn't stop." Ward's gaze flickered to the floor where Daniel still lay beneath a white sheet. "And that's when I didn't think," she whispered. "I just reacted. I was scared." He scribbled something, then looked back at her. "You mentioned earlier that your husband had been different lately. Angry?" "Yes, paranoid. There was another woman. I didn't know what he was capable of anymore." Her tone was steady now, practiced. Each sentence fit neatly into the next, like pieces of a story rehearsed in the dark. Ward studied her for a long time. "You've been through something terrible, Mrs. Hale. But forgive me for asking. You seem very composed." Emma's eyes met his, calm and unreadable. "When you've lived with fear long enough," she said softly, "it teaches you how to breathe through anything." He nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. His eyes drifted to her wrist as she adjusted the blanket, faint bruises, fingerprints pressed in pale violet against her skin. He noticed but said nothing. When he finally left, Emma remained at the table, listening to the echo of the closing door. The recorder sat on the counter beside her, wiped clean, its red light forever dark. She touched her wrist gently, tracing the marks with her thumb. They were proof, but not of guilt. Proof of what she had endured, what she had become, and what she had survived. Spring came late that year. The cemetery was damp and quiet, the grass still slick with morning rain. Emma stood before the simple gray headstone, her black coat drawn close against the chill. The inscription was clean, unadorned. Daniel Hale, beloved husband. 9/86/2025, beloved. The word almost made her smile. She placed a small bouquet of white lilies at the base of the stone. The air smelled of earth and damp leaves. "I thought I'd feel different," she murmured. "Lighter, maybe." Her voice was steady, her reflection faint in the polished granite. "But I guess some promises don't really end, do they?" A breeze swept through the trees, bending the flowers. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and laughed softly. though it sounded nothing like laughter. "Till death did us part," she said under her breath. And here we are. From a distance, the faint crunch of footsteps stirred the silence. She turned slightly, just enough to see a man near the gate, coat collar up, watching. Detective Ward. His presence was subtle but deliberate, a shadow that refused to fade. For a moment, their eyes met across the graves. He gave a small nod, polite, professional, but his gaze lingered too long to be casual. Emma's lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. She turned back to the grave, tracing Daniel's name one last time with her gloved fingers. "Rest easy," she whispered. "You kept your vow." "And so did I." Then she walked away, heels tapping against the stone path, her figure shrinking into the mist. Ward watched until she disappeared behind the iron gate. He exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. Something about her calm still didn't sit right. Love had ended, but the story hadn't.